Hello everyone, and welcome back to Movies with Michael. Today we're discussing Season 1 of Amazon Prime's The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. But before we get to that, if you haven't seen all 6 of my videos on all 6 of the Middle-earth saga films, you should go and check those out right now. But with that being said, let's get started. Now, initially there are some inherent issues that Season 1, and really the show itself, were always going to have. The first being that in the realm of live-action Middle-earth media, it just so happens that the greatest cinematic trilogy of all time can be found. Talk about a high standard. The second is that Amazon clearly did not know what they were doing with how they were advertising the show, in that they didn't know whether they were wanting to reach new fans of the franchise, people who were fans of the films, or longtime fans, Tolkienites like myself. And that resulted in the promo material, for the most part, being generic at best, but embarrassing at worst. The third is that unlike the Third Age of Middle-earth that has The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, like in-depth stories that could fit into the confines of a show or movie, the Second Age for the most part doesn't really have that, and that resulted in a lot of the events that take place over longer periods of time being compressed into a shorter amount of time. In the case of Season 1, over 90% of the content we get is original content for the show and not based on anything that Tolkien wrote himself. With this in mind, let's begin, and consider this your spoiler warning. The Rings of Power Season 1 serves as our reintroduction to Middle-earth in live action after an 8-year absence. Being the most expensive television show to date, the production value is shown across the board, aside from those elven ceremonial suits of armor in Episode 1, and whatever the heck that was in Episode 3. In addition, the show features great music by composer Bram McCreary and features LOTR Films composer Howard Shore returning to do the show's intro track. The show echoes the film's trend of the opening prologue sequence with setting up the main conflict of the season. The show's narrative has many different plot lines going on at once, but the constant issue is that it either felt like it was going too fast or too slow, and there was hardly ever a time when I felt like the season was going at just the right pace that it needed to. The Numenor plotline features a great design for the capital city as well as the people's attires, and it does set up the conflict of the island being the split between the two political parties of the Kingsmen and the Faithful, which of course sets up the conflict for the island in future seasons. The Khazad-dûm plotline was one they nailed with the design, the music, the dwarves, you name it. Unlike with Numenor, where the conflict is among the people, the conflict of this plotline is between the realm's king and the realm's prince. Though we are encouraged to root for Prince Durin IV, as he is the central character, we see by the end of the plotline, though we're quite frustrated with King Durin's decisions, we can see that his concerns are very legitimate. Plotline's companion is the Lindon/Eregion story. I don't mind a whole lot of what they're doing here, but there is still some very sketchy stuff surrounding the Mithril and its relation to the fate of the elves. Now you could easily just dismiss this as yet another change by the showrunners to fit the story they wanted to tell, but I'm not putting out the possibility just yet that there is much more going on here, especially with Lord Celebrimbor. Now the Southlands plotline was one I was very concerned about at first, but I grew to like the idea of visually showing the build-up to and creation of the land of Mordor. And this plotline also has something that the show, so far anyway, has absolutely nailed, that being the orcs. And this plotline also shows that the men of the South aren't all willing to fight the good fight and would rather be at the mercy of the darkness out of fear and despair. A lot of these scenes foreshadow the evil practices that will take place in future seasons of the show that we didn't really get to see a whole lot of in the films. The odd one out here is the Harfoot plotline. I just wouldn't have included them in the show to begin with, because the point of these creatures is that they didn't really do anything until Bilbo Baggins leaves with the company of Thorin Oakenshield in the Third Age. But it's in the show, so did the showrunners make it work? Well, mostly no. But the problem really is that they couldn't decide how they wanted to portray how the Harfoots live their lives and what their culture is. So in episode 4 we have them talking about how those who fall behind are left behind, but in episode 7 we have Largo giving a speech about how Harfoots are treated each other better than everyone else. And that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. My favorite part about this plotline, though, is the Stranger, who is confirmed to be a wizard, most likely Gandalf, and I really wish we got to see more of the Mystics, because they just didn't really do anything until the last episode of the season, and they were offed immediately. Now let's talk about the characters, and there's a lot of them, so I won't get to every single one, but I'll try and cover some that are canon and some that are original. Our main character, Galadriel, played by Morfydd Clark, is a warrior ultimately looking to avenge her fallen brother by taking down the Dark Lord Sauron. Now, before watching the show, I thought that the showmakers would for sure use the plotline that Tolkien wrote himself about Galadriel not being tricked by Sauron's fair form, and they would use that as a key to prop up her character as a symbol of feminism. Galadriel, the woman, is not fooled by the Dark Lord, but Celebrimbor, the man, is. But I was absolutely wrong. Galadriel was the most deceived of them all. Now, I will say that there were definitely some times where the script went too far, in particular in episode 4, when Galadriel quite literally asks to see the manager. It was only in episodes 7 and 8 that I felt we saw Galadriel for who she was. The result is a predominantly annoying lead for the show's first season. Galadriel's future son-in-law, Elrond Half-Elven, is an interesting case. I was not on board with this characterization at first, but over time I grew to appreciate and actually love the fact that they are portraying a character who has yet to experience his greatest sorrows, though I'm still not a fan of the hair that they chose for him. After Galadriel's story takes us to the Kingdom of Númenor, we meet my favorite canon character in the show so far, Elendil, played by Lloyd Owen. I thought his backstory was changed unnecessarily, but the actor and the script bring out a man of nobility of Middle-earth that echoes a lot of what we saw in the Middle-earth films. His countenance, his speech, how he handles different situations, it all is there, and I'm looking forward to see how his story unfolds, in particular with his family drama. My least favorite canon character in the show so far, unfortunately, has been Celebrimbor. My problem here isn't the script, but with the actor. The actor is noticeably older than all the other elves actors, and this would be fine if he was playing somebody like Círdan the Shipwright, but not when he's playing someone who's supposed to be younger than Galadriel. This results in the character just being an old bum for much of his screen time, and really the only time when I felt like we were seeing Celebrimbor was in the final episode. The reason why I mind this much is because Celebrimbor is the elf of the Second Age, but we'll just have to see how it plays out. The character of Durin IV was someone that this season got right. He can show the kindness, the loyalty, the stubbornness, and the anger you'd expect from a dwarf, while delivering some comedic moments when needed. He is the Peter Jackson dwarf of the show, while his father, King Durin, is the Tolkien dwarf. The main villain, Adar, though being an original character, actor Joseph Mawle gives us not only the best performance in the show, but a better elf portrayal than all the canon elves we've gotten so far. Ouch! The concept of an early corrupted elf is one I would not have thought of for a physical enemy for the show before the supernatural one shows up. Also, the fact that this is the first character we've seen who actually cares about the orcs, though be it in a delusional and psychopathic way. Every scene with Adar is done well, and he is definitely one of the season's highlights. The character of Pharazôn is also a character that I think they've done quite well so far. Every single scene that he has is setting him up as someone who's a man of the people, and he will use that favor from the people to lead Númenor further down its dark path. Now let's talk about Halbrand. I was strongly of the belief that they were setting him up to be an antithesis to movie Aragorn, a reluctant king of men who accepted his destiny only to eventually fail. Isn't it ironic how one of your favorite characters turns out to be Sauron? From the get-go, many Tolkienites, myself included, were very doubtful that Halbrand was Sauron because Galadriel would have surely seen through it. But I think we should have figured out that this Galadriel not only isn't the Galadriel we're familiar with, but in the context of the show, she isn't herself. Yes, I do think she's been nerfed for the show, and this reminds me of how the Witch King managed to break Gandalf the White's staff in the extended Return of the King. Yet again, another movie change to build the power of the bad guy. I definitely didn't prefer this direction, but I don't think I'm enraged by it. I think this is the last time we will ever see Halbrand, though, but we will see a lot more of Sauron. And that's kind of sad because I think for the time that he had, actor Charlie Vickers did a fantastic job. But next season, I'm expecting another actor to be playing Sauron, or maybe multiple actors at the same time. After all, Sauron is a master of changing his shape, so we'll have to see. The Rings of Power Season 1, while not being the agenda-filled disaster that I foresaw, still has much to improve on. It does some things right, some things wrong, and there are still some things that I'm very confused about. However, I did enjoy watching the show, and I am definitely excited for Season 2. So that's why I'll give Amazon Prime's The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Season 1, a 5.5 out of 10. With that being said, everybody, thank you all so much for joining me today, and please remember to leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe for more content about movies. That's all for now, and I'll see you all in the next video.